Welcome back to Nurse on Call. This podcast provides emotional support and general education from a registered nurse. It is not medical or mental health treatment and does not replace care from a licensed provider. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency or an immediate danger, please contact emergency services or crisis hotline in your area. Always seek care from a qualified healthcare or mental health professional for individual concerns. Thank you. I'm really grateful you are here today. Today, we're talking about a kind of grief that many people carry silently. A grief that often goes unnoticed because no one physically died, but something still changed deeply inside of you. I think this kind of grief can feel especially lonely because people around you may not fully recognize it. There is no funeral, no obvious moment where the world stops, no clear language people use to talk about it, but loss can still exist. Sometimes grief comes from illness, sometimes from burnout, sometimes from trauma, sometimes from caregiving, sometimes from anxiety, and sometimes from emotional exhaustion, and sometimes from becoming a version of yourself you barely recognize anymore. When those changes happen slowly, quietly, or invisibly, people often expect you to simply adjust and continue moving forward. But change can still hurt, even when nobody else fully understands it. And if you've been carrying invisible grief lately, I hope today's episode feels like a reminder that your pain still matters too. Because some grief is not about losing a person. Sometimes it's about grieving parts of yourself. I think one of the hardest parts about invisible grief is how difficult it can be to explain. Because many people don't realize they're grieving at all. They just know something feels different or something feels heavier, harder, more emotionally exhausting. And sometimes what's being grieved is not one major moment, but the accumulation of many smaller losses over time. Maybe you miss the version of yourself who felt more energetic, the version who woke up without immediately feeling overwhelmed, the version who trusted their body more, the version who laughed more easily, the version who didn't overthink every symptom, every responsibility, and every emotional burden. And when life changes through illness, stress, trauma, burnout, caregiving, or emotional exhaustion, those losses can begin adding up quietly. You may grieve your old routines, your confidence, your emotional capacity, your sense of safety, your motivation, your independence, your energy, and your peace of mind. And because many of those losses are invisible, people around you may not fully recognize the emotional weight of what you are carrying. Sometimes people say things like, "At least things are better now." "You're strong. You'll get through it." Everyone gets stressed. While those comments may come from good intentions, they can sometimes make people feel more alone. Underneath it all, there may still be grief. I think many people feel guilty for grieving versions of themselves they miss. They wonder, shouldn't I just be grateful? Maybe I'm overreacting. Other people might have it worse. But grief is not competition. And emotional pain does not become invalid simply because someone else is suffering too. Your pain matters because it affected you. And I think many people silently mourn parts of themselves while continuing to function normally on the outside. They still go to work. They still care for people. They still answer text, show up, but internally, they feel tired in ways they cannot fully explain. Sometimes that grief shows up quietly, not always through crying, sometimes through emotional numbness, through exhaustion, through irritability, sometimes through disconnection, sometimes through longing for a version of life that once felt easier. I think one of the saddest parts about invisible grief is how often people minimize their own suffering, especially people who are used to being strong for others. They tell themselves, I should be able to handle this. I just need to push through. I don't have time to fall apart. But carrying emotional pain silently does not make it disappear. And eventually, the nervous system begins asking to be acknowledged through exhaustion, through anxiety, through emotional overwhelm. And honestly, many people have been surviving emotionally for so long that they no longer realize how much they've lost along the way. I also think invisible grief changes the relationship people have with themselves. Sometimes people stop recognizing themselves emotionally. Things that once felt easy now feel difficult. Things that once brought joy now feel distant. And there can be deep sadness in realizing how much life has changed you. Not because you are weak, but because being human means we are affected by what we carry. I think many people need permission to acknowledge that, to admit, this changed me emotionally. Because healing does not require pretending nothing hurt. And grieving change does not mean you're stuck in negativity. It means you are honoring the reality of what your heart and nervous system have been through. Another thing I want to say today is this. Invisible grief often creates loneliness because people feel like they have to keep functioning while quietly hurting. And I know many listeners understand that feeling. The feeling of smiling while exhausted. The feeling of appearing okay while internally overwhelmed. The feeling of carrying emotional heaviness nobody else can fully see. And if that is you, I hope you know you're not dramatic for feeling affected deeply by life. You are human. And emotional exhaustion deserves compassion too. Not just visible suffering. Compassion. I also think people sometimes underestimate how much grief can exist within chronic stress. When your nervous system has been overwhelmed for a long time, it changes the way you experience life emotionally. You may stop feeling fully rested. You may stop feeling emotionally safe. And you may stop trusting calmness because part of you is always anticipating the next problem. Over time, people begin grieving peace itself, grieving softness, grieving simplicity, grieving emotional ease. And that grief is real. One of the most healing things we can do for ourselves is stop minimizing our emotional experiences simply because they are invisible. Because invisible pain is still pain, and if life has changed you, if stress has changed you, if illness has changed you, if burnout has changed you, if caregiving has also changed you, you deserve acknowledgement for that, not shame. Not pressure to instantly move on. Acknowledgement, compassion, space to be human. Sometimes healing begins not by forcing yourself to become who you were before, but by gently caring for who you are now. And I know that can be difficult, especially if you miss old versions of yourself deeply. I hope you continue offering yourself gentleness anyway, because you deserve kindness while navigating change, and you deserve support while carrying invisible grief too. As we close today's episode, I want to remind you of something important. Just because your grief is invisible does not mean it is insignificant. And just because life changed you quietly does not mean your emotional pain matters any less. If you've been grieving parts of yourself lately, your old energy, your old peace, your old confidence, your old sense of safety, I hope you know you are not alone in that experience. And I hope you stop judging yourself so harshly for being affected by difficult things. Because your nervous system has carried a lot. Your heart has carried a lot. And you deserve compassion while healing too. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you today. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to be here, to be present with you, and to hopefully create a space where people feel emotionally safe, understood, and less alone. Future episodes of Nurse on Call will continue every 2 weeks, and until next time, please take care of yourself gently. Nurse on Call.